So welcome everyone. My name is Lou Tormenta. I'm with the Lero Group and formerly with DDC some years ago. And I was given the privilege of being asked to moderate this session. How many people out there can actually hear anything I'm saying? Oh, that's not bad. I was kind of hoping it would be less, but nevertheless. Okay, so we have a very distinguished panel today, and my job is to make sure that we keep things going along, and that if there are questions that you may have towards the end of the session, that you can ask those questions of us. And the subject of this workshop is how to introduce your firms, whether you're a minority firm, a WBE firm, to some of the prime contractors and prime consultants that gain DDC work, and then how to maintain that relationship and how to continue that relationship so that your firm grows and that your firm prospers and that you prosper. So what we're going to do at first is we're going to have all the panel members introduce themselves. So again, these are individuals that are either presidents, CEOs, senior vice presidents of their respective companies, and they are here today to answer many of your questions, and they have a tremendous amount of experience in managing their own companies and also handling what are subcontracts and firm relationships. So at this point, what I'm going to do is start with the first individual to my left, John Sullivan. John, why don't you introduce yourself? Use the mic.
Good morning.
You
Can you hear me okay?
better stand up.
My name is John Sullivan. I'm with SLS. We are one of the Build It Back contractors. That picture there is actually not me. That's my twin brother. So, but we look a lot alike. But we're one of the prime contractors in Staten Island. We work with the MWBE community very much every day. We need them, particularly for a residential project, because typically residential projects are smaller firms, and it fits the MWBE program very well, and we can help to advance them. So look forward to answering your questions.
Good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. My name is Elizabeth Velez. I'm president of the Velez organization. We are a minority business enterprise firm started by my father 43 years ago. So I'm hoping to bring some lessons learned from us on how to do business with the primes, kind of the other way, Lou. For DDC, we are on the team with Tishman for Build It Back. I serve as chair of DDC's diversity board. I serve on the School Construction Authority's diversity board. I'm on the board of the Women's Builders Council and chair of the Latino Builders Council. So we're going to also talk, I hope today, about leveraging those relationships for you all to get some more work.
I'm John Hagedorn from AECOM. I handle the PM, Program Management and Construction Management Group. Some of my clients include the Housing Authority, School Construction Authority, DDC. We're involved with Tishman with the Build It Back program, professional services organization, architecture, engineering, construction management, and also get involved on the contracting side. For some of the smaller firms here, I'm one of the SCA mentor CMs. My office is right down the hall over there, so if you're not pre-qualified, you need to get pre-qualified because it's a wonderful program, and I know DDC is looking to mirror it.
Thank you, John. Sandra?
Hi, good morning. My name is Sandra Wilkin from Bradford Construction, and actually started my business in this room 25 years ago trying to find the School Construction Authority. So navigating the process is a never-ending process, but definitely there are ways to do it, and today you'll hear about from this panel the helpful hints that I've learned and still learning in terms of the opportunities that are out there. And there's no doubt there are more opportunities now than there ever been before. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Hi, good morning. I'm Denise Richardson, the Executive Director of the General Contractors Association. Our members do much of DDC's infrastructure work as well as the infrastructure work for other agencies, so I'm here today to answer any of your questions for those of you who may be infrastructure contractors. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, panel. I think one of the things, or one of the reasons I should say, that the majority of you are here is not necessarily to be told specifically how to run your business, but what opportunities there may be out there in terms of working with the various agencies, and how do you get to those opportunities coming through the individuals and companies that are priming and have been as pre-established for quite some time with these various agencies. So I think one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to break this down into two primary components. One which is professional services side. Maybe a show of hands of who in the audience is on the professional services. Okay. And construction services. Oh, so it's a good split. From my vantage here, without counting every head, it's about a 50-50 split. So one of the things we're going to try to do, because it's very different, obviously, as to how you pursue opportunities if you're looking for construction, hard construction opportunities, or whether you're looking for professional services opportunity. And so the panel actually has individuals on it with various degrees of skills and work opportunities that we would like to hear from. So I think the first one we're going to start with is on the professional opportunity side, to see companies such as the one that John Hagedorn works for, you know, URS, AECOM, whatever they're being called today. But certainly I think in terms of the first question to John, really is, with a company as large as the one that he works for, how does a small professional services firm actually is able to contact them and not get lost in the mix, right? Who do you actually call and end up actually getting a return call, and how do you get into the system? So John, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
It's a difficult process working with a company of the size that we are. But I will say this about for your opportunities, the main thing is to be on board with the websites of all of the agencies, whether it's the city record or it's each of the agencies. You have to be on board with the focus on MWBE participation to the 30% goal that we'd all like to see. You have the opportunity to sometimes find out before I even know about a professional service opportunity. And for the pursuits that we go after, it's always vital for us to put the strongest team together. So a lot of the times it's first on, first in. So you have to do your due diligence, you have to find out where the opportunities are, and then you have to reach out for the firm. And yes, Lou is 100% right. Sometimes it's difficult to find the right person to speak to, but that's where the perseverance comes into play. At some point in time, you will. Maybe you'll miss one opportunity, but for that second opportunity that comes up, you'll be able to hook up with the right person for the right contract for you.
Just as a follow-up question, John, does URS, AECOM have any sort of a formal process where firms can actually make applications, or someone specifically that they can call at your firm?
Well, you know, Lou, the way it usually goes is if it's somebody who worked for us before, it's automatic. If it's somebody new, we would go through our due diligence and find out if they're an acceptable firm to the company. So the paperwork would have to come in from the firm for us to get legal to look at it, for us to get accounting to look at it, and make a decision if this is a good teaming partner.
Thank you, John. I think in terms of trying to take advantage, again, of the various individuals that are up on the panel and their ability to respond to some of what I hopefully will be some of your questions, I think one of the ones in terms of a follow-up to John that maybe Elizabeth can help us with is that, so Elizabeth's firm How many years now in business, Elizabeth?
43.
So Elizabeth's firm's been in business for 43 years, and I'm sure as a WBE, right? And
MBE.
And an MBE.
And an MBE.
And an MBE. The WBE is sort of evident because
Right.
you're a woman, right? So that comes with the territory. But
I hope so.
certainly trying to give a little bit of insight as to how your firm, as an MBE firm, is able to deal with companies such as, you know, these larger companies that are out there that must be somewhat difficult to try to get an entree into, and how you would go about doing that. Maybe you could share that with us.
We could have a whole day's session on that one topic alone, and I know that Sandra and I could probably talk very well about how to team and how to sell yourself. But the most important thing I think I could tell you today is, as you're looking to get on some of these mega projects and just regular projects at all, if you're looking to team, teaming helped Velez organization. I know teaming helped Bradford back in the 80s. It helped us develop capacity, get introduced to clients that we might not know. But how do you go about getting on a team? You have to research what's out there, what opportunities are out there, and research the firms that you're going to be talking to. One thing that I think a lot of MWBE firms don't do enough, they don't figure out what their niche is, what their sweet spot is. So I was just talking to somebody before, and he was a plumbing contractor, but he wanted to be a general contractor. I said, that's great, but what's your sweet spot? What can you bring to the table? What can you bring your team to the table? And in talking with him and kind of distilling it, it's plumbing. That's where his sweet spot is. So it's important for us as MWBEs to operate within our capacity as we go and build our capabilities. So when you go to a firm, research what they're about and go to them prepared. Tell them what you're prepared to do for them, what you can bring to the table, how you can be more strategic and win a project with them. It's all about teaming. We're all trying to do, complete a project at the end of the day. And if you can articulate that the best, you'll get the most attention.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think from sort of some personal experience in terms of being the CEO of the Lero Group, that I have found in terms of having firms that come to us and want to work with us, just to share with you my personal experience, is that one of the things that we are always looking for, which I'm sure you can hear from everyone who's here on the panel, is that advantage, right? It's that competitive advantage in terms of pursuing work where we're not on the construction side simply bidding work, right? We have to submit proposals, we have to get pre-qualified, we have to submit proposals, we have to go through an interview process. And one of the things that we're always looking for is, what are those teaming members, taking from what Elizabeth was saying, what are those teaming members that we can bring on board that's going to give us that specific edge, that little extra point on those grading sheets that are going to help us win that project, right? And that's true whether you're a minority firm or whether you're another major prime and we're looking for a joint venture. But one of the things that I would recommend is that once you approach, if what you're looking to do is approach a prime firm that you're interested in working with, and I think what the panel said, specifically what Elizabeth said was very important, is that you have to focus on what you're going to sell to that particular prime. It isn't enough to come in and just say, we'd like to work with you, we're a great firm, please help us. Most firms will look at that, frankly, as sort of a sign of sort of chaos, you know, of a lack of focus. Because unless you go in and say, look, I know there's this particular project, on this particular project I want to team with you, and the reason that I want to team with you is because I'm going to help you win that project. And that is effectively sort of the algorithm that needs to be used, because unless you can show that particular prime firm why it is that you're going to help them win the project, then you're just one of many, right? And that happens with us. I mean, our company, we're 750 people. The company that John works for, 90,000, about 90,000 people. So when I go to John and say, you know, Lero would like to team with you for this particular project, I go there with something that I know that I can offer and help him win the job. And without that, on the professional services side, it's very, very difficult for you to get their attention. So if you walk away with anything from here today, I think that's a really, really important point. Let's talk a little bit on the construction side. And I don't know how many are in the building side versus the infrastructure side, the heavy construction. Building? Building. Heavy construction? Anybody in the heavy construction side? Okay. So we're going to have Denise Richardson, who is the President, Executive Director of the GCA. She can explain to you what the GCA is, but it's the largest organization, association that represents primarily the heavy construction contractors in the city of New York, or probably even further. So maybe, Denise, you could talk a little bit about how your members sort of, how do they get their minority firms to work with them, and what kind of programs do you see them having that allow some of the smaller firms to maybe reach out and be able to connect with your members?
Good morning. I know it's very hard for everyone to hear. The most important thing, whether you're a building contractor or an infrastructure contractor, the most important thing for you to do is to go to the pre-bid conference. That's where you make your connections. That's where you're talking about the specific jobs. And go to the pre-bid conference having already acquired the plans and specs for the job and having already looked at it. And go to the pre-bid conference and make sure you meet all the representatives of the prime contractors that are there. And ask questions. Ask questions about the work. The agency is standing there, the primes are standing there. I can't emphasize enough how important the attendance at the pre-bid conference is, because that's where you will find out the schedule, that's where you will register to get all of the project addenda, of which there are many, and that will put you in the best position to bid the piece of the work that you're interested in bidding. And the other thing that you all have to pay attention to is to remember that every prime contractor is going to organize their subcontract packages slightly differently. So it's really important as you go through the whole bid cycle and as you look at the addenda and you look at the job to stay in touch with each of the prime contractors that you intend to bid to, so that you're watching how they're packaging that job and you're watching the changes as they move forward. And I cannot tell you enough how important it is. You must submit a bid when the prime contractor is asking for the bids. The days of call me in case you get the job and then we'll talk are over, because if they don't know where your bid is in the scheme, they can't include your price in their own bid. And in the public world, overwhelmingly, most of the jobs are still bid opens at 2 p.m. and we read them out and the low bidder is the low bidder. For most of the projects that you all will be working on, there are very few negotiated contracts. So you must organize your firm so that you are paying attention to when the bids are due by your primes and submitting your bid. Then the prime contractors will sit down with you after the bid is open, review the job, make sure that everything is good to go. But if you miss that bid opportunity, they are not going to call you back because someone else will have submitted a bid. That is the two most important things you have to remember. Go to the pre-bid conference, well, 3. Acquire the plans and specs and make sure you submit a bid.
Thank you, Denise. Very good. Do you find that the majority of the members, your members, the contractors that are doing this type of work, require subcontractors to also have bonds, or is that?
It varies depending on the scope of the job, frankly. If you're talking about, you know, a $100 million project, then we're going to be looking for the subcontractors to have bonds. If we're looking at a 5 or 10 or, you know, $15 million water, sewer main, you know, what I'm going to call routine infrastructure replacement, the bonding capacity of the subcontracting team is not as critical. But if you're doing a major subcontract on a major project, say like the Brooklyn Bridge or something like that, then you do have to come to the table prepared to have a bond. The other thing that's really important to note is for the type of work that you're doing, if there are any specialty requirements, particularly in bridge work, make sure your people have lead abatement training. Even if they're not doing lead abatement, make sure that they've all had the proper training and the proper certifications. That gives you a big leg up. Also, if you're working on the utility infrastructure work, make sure that your company is on the vendor list for both National Grid and Con Ed. That gives your company also a big leg up on the infrastructure work, because a lot of our infrastructure work that we do for DDC ends up with a lot of ancillary work that involves utility relocation and sometimes capital work for the utilities. So if your company is qualified in those areas, that's a big step up for you as well.
Great, thank you very much, Denise. I guess just very similar to the infrastructure construction work is also the building side work. And Sandra Wilkin from Bradford Construction, who is also both minority and WBE, just WBE firm, has a tremendous amount of experience, and I've known Sandra for a very long time, and maybe you can share with us on the building side sort of the similar sort of approach that your firm has taken over the years in approaching primes, and also what you feel are some of the key important sort of aspects of going, as Denise was saying, to the pre-bid conferences and so on. Maybe you could share your experience with us.
Sure, Lou. A key area, I think, for any firm, whether you're a minority woman-owned firm or a prime firm, is to do the research on the particular project that you're looking at. In particular, as a CM, it's very important to read every aspect of that proposal and to really identify the particular issues. But rather than keep looking at one RFP after the other and feeling like you're in the spin cycle, you should make sure that you focus on areas where you can specialize and stand out to the respective firms that you're looking to team with. In addition to that, have a one page. Keep everything very simple, because people don't have a lot of time going through page after page of qualification statements. Have one page about your capacity and your capabilities. That's very important. You can have it as an exhibitor at a conference like this, and it's important that you can get that attachment out with your email. The other things that we're seeing as the minority and women businesses, small businesses, are growing, the amount of work and your capabilities are also important, and the requirements are becoming much more stringent. So we're seeing now that your financial statements not only have to be a review statement, now in the RFPs, they're requiring the subconsultant to have audited statements. That's a very different approach than the usual way that we've been used to in getting an accountant to do just a review statement. And most of the primes and also the owners are looking at that financial statement. And keep in mind, if you're looking to pre-qualify, more often than not, that owner or that prime is looking at your personal financials. And they're going to go to Equifax or any of the other credit report systems. So it's important that you keep up making sure that you pay your bills on time, because you don't want to be the weak link in the chain. You want to be strong and be able to be very focused and financially have the wherewithals to keep up with that project.
I guess just a follow-up. In terms of maintaining the relationship with your prime contracts, I mean, I know you do a lot of prime work yourself, so you can see both sides of the of the table. But in terms of when you are a sub to certain prime firms, how do you make sure that you ensure that the performance that your people are providing and that, you know, the work that they're doing, that you stay on, let's call it the good side of the firms to ensure that there's repeat work? How do you, as the executive of your firm, make sure that that happens?
It's a great question. In this business, you're as good as your staff is and as good as the team that you put in place. And one of the other things that's necessary is for as small firms, we wear a lot of hats. So we're doing a lot of things at the same time. And it's often that we miss finding out what's actually going on our projects. So you should diary for yourself or somebody in your firm contacting the people that are working in the field. And you'd be surprised as to sometimes what you hear, and if you hear it early enough, you can correct it. So it's a matter of making that phone call, getting that email, and staying connected, or having somebody in your company stay connected with the people that are in the field. I know if I don't call John Hagedorn at least once a week, I know that I'm in trouble, because he is miles and miles ahead in terms of those what's going on, and he knows everything that's going on in each and every project. So it's important to try to keep that standard.
And John, would you, from your side of the table, since Sandra mentioned your name in terms of being a prime, how do you make sure that the firms that are working for you and are subcontractors to you or subconsultants, that their performance is up to par? And how do you make a determination of who gets the next project? Because I'm sure you have a lot of folks calling you. How do you make that determination?
Well, I can speak for professional. It's no different from contracting or professional services firm, okay? If you're not about client satisfaction, you don't get the next job, okay? I visit my jobs weekly, okay, whichever jobs I'm responsible for. I speak to my project manager, okay? I speak to my support staff, because you have to make sure everybody's happy. A happy employee is a good employee, okay? And then if there is an issue with someone who might be working for one of my subconsultants, okay, I'll find out, and just as Sandra said, she'll call me to find out how she's doing. I'll call her to let her know that there's a problem or everything is all systems go. And it's all about the communication. It's all about, and not only the communication, it's all about seeing your client. Because as much as your PM, he's looking to have a job, or your superintendent, he's looking to have a job, he might be hiding a few things from you, okay? One thing he can't hide from is the client. And the client clearly will place that call to me. And if you're not responsible to your client and your subconsultants or your subcontractors that you're using, okay, that's just, failure is looming, okay? So it's about communication, cooperation, and collaboration.
Thank you, John. And I'm going to get to Johnny in a minute, because you're going to be sort of the last question, but probably the longest question. But I think for Elizabeth, I think one of the things that we're talking about here is all about how do firms connect with prime firms, how do they get work from prime firms, how do they sustain the relationship. But I'm sure that at times, and especially since your firm, you said 43 years that you've been in business, there must be firms that you've come up against, prime firms, that you really don't want to work for, right? And I guess part of the question is, you know, how do you make that determination in terms of you're not just going to go out there and want to work for everyone, right? That there are some, hopefully none of the ones that are sitting around here today, but there probably are some that you would say, I never want to work for that firm, and this is why, right? And I think that's important to know as well, right? This isn't all about going out and trying to get business in business regardless of where you are. It's not a smorgasbord. You want to go a la carte a little bit. So can you, I'm sure you've had some experience with that.
Absolutely. And it's more based on what the project is. I have to be honest with you, I'll let you guys all in on a little secret. There are some firms on this dais that we've said no to. And it's not no because it's been a bad experience. It's not no because we've had a bad experience. It's about wanting to be strategic and competitive and who you think is the best firm, right, to win that work. When you choose a partner, and it's going to be a joint venture or just being on a team, the beautiful thing about diversity, and it's well known, it's irrefutable, in fact, that diversity enriches a project, but also increases the return on investment, right? So it's great that firms are out looking to select you, but you've got to do the selection just as much as they are selecting you. It goes back to what Sandra said before, doing research about the project. Listen to the industry also. Hear how other people have had experiences with those firms, and arm yourself that you're ready to not only perform a project, but to be a strategic partner no matter what your situation is, no matter what your contractual obligation is. And lastly, as you're choosing who you're going to go with, make sure that you put your own unique stamp on your project. Let the client see that as well. And it show a seamless team, but show them that you're there as well. Choose wisely. That's another thing we could have a whole day on, is choosing a partner.
No, I think that's very, very insightful. Just as I was saying earlier, that as a prime firm, we try to select either a partner, either as a sub-consultant or a JV partner, that's going to help us win the work. I've seen many times, and I've experienced this with Elizabeth. I think we are one of the companies that she has said no to, because she's done her homework and she knows that perhaps there's another company out there that has a better shot and a more of a competitive edge as a prime of winning that work. And most of us as primes, when you look at firms like Elizabeth's and Sandra's firm, we want to have them exclusively working for us, right? We don't like to have firms that come to work for us and they're working for every other company as well and submitting proposals, right? We don't want that, because we want to gain and have that competitive edge. I think what Elizabeth is saying is very true, which is on their end, they do the same thing, is they look at us and say, does Lero in this case have the best opportunity to win this job? And if they want me to go exclusive, I better not basically get on their train. I'm going to get on somebody else's train. And I think that's a super smart way of doing business, because you can't be everything to everyone. So I think, thank you very much.
Lou, can I add one more thing?
Yes, of course.
One of the things that you have to look at that's very, very important, and I'm sure everybody on this panel can recognize this, is there's a lot of times when I'm going after a pursuit that I may get a whisper in my ear about some of the MWBE firms who are good performers. Okay, so if you're looking at teaming, okay, you better have a good relationship with the clients that you're going after. Very, very, very important, okay? Thank you.
Very good. No, and just to reinforce what John is saying, when we have firms that come to us and say, you know, I really get along very, very well with that particular client, be it DDC or any other agency, or even a private client, and you should put me on that team because I know that I'm going to bring that competitive advantage, you could be assured that on our side of the table, we're going to try to validate that, right? We're going to try to vet that. But if that is true, if you have been able to not only try to deal with us, but deal with the clients as well, and they're very likely, especially for the minority and women-owned firms, much more open to speaking to you than they are even to us, that you should develop that relationship with them, because that is worth a tremendous amount of currency, that when you come to us and say, DDC really likes me, they really think I do a great job, and I've been talking to Deputy Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner XYZ, and you should call him or her and find out about me. That is worth more than any good graphics or good proposal you could put together, because that tells us that there's a competitive edge that we can gain by bringing you onto our team. So in terms of, we're getting close to the end, but I did want to get to what is one of the largest programs that's currently under DDC's control, which I'm sure you've heard about, which is the Build It Back program. And Johnny Sullivan, and maybe he can also share with us, since they're really headquartered out of Texas, Houston. They have an office here in New York, but they also have an office in Houston. I'd like him to talk a little bit about how the process is working for getting onto those pre-qualified lists. There's these things called PQLs that DDC has constructed in order to get contractors onto that list, in order to be able to do work and bid work. And one of the things that we're all trying to do, we're on the program as well. They're running Staten Island, we're running Brooklyn, and Tishman is running Queens. And all of us are in dire need of getting qualified contractors onto those lists. So I would ask you to look at those lists and see if you can get pre-qualified. But I'm going to ask Johnny to talk about that. He's very familiar with the whole program and the process. He's intimately involved. He's been a great counterpart at SLS, that's the name of the company, to work with. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about that, John.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question. I'm glad we're talking about it here. As the program was described to everybody earlier, the 3 CMs are Tishman, Lero, and SLS. We're all in different areas. We can only hire contractors that are on this PQL list. And you can go to the DDC's website. Very clearly, they actually make it very easy to, it is a lot of paperwork, but it gets a lot of paperwork out of the way. And once the DDC puts you on that PQL list, GC, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, then we can then bid out the work that we have in the different boroughs to only that list. That's it. So you get pre-qualified, they do the Vindex check, they do the RFAS check. Basically, as soon as you're on that list, we bid it out, we can procure the next day. We don't have to qualify you, you're already pre-qualified. The program we're doing, and we do SLS, we're based out of Houston, Texas, but we do storm disaster recovery work around the country. We're in New Jersey. We came here right after Sandy. We did Katrina, we did Ike, we did Dolly, did the Haitian earthquakes. We do this work all over. We need as many contractors as we can because a storm doesn't happen every year. So all of a sudden you have a massive amount of work that needs to be done. And so we need to add all the contractors we can. And that's why this program, I would tell you, it's probably more important on the Build It Back side than any project DDC has, because it's all brand new types of contractors. Because DDC does not do residential work. But we need all of you to join, and that's why it's adding a larger sub base that's never been working for DDC again. Or I'm sorry, not again, before. Hopefully we can help them grow and they can do the schools and the fire stations when we're done.
Johnny, how does your experience in New York with the minority and smaller firms compare to other parts of the country? Can you share that? We tend to be very sort of parochial here. We think this stuff only happens in New York, but I'm sure it happens in the rest of the country. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Again, we're not as diverse in Texas, and I'm from Galveston. Houston actually is a very diverse community. I think behind New York, it is the most diverse community. That's because of the oil and gas business. It brings a lot of people. Here in New York, we found it a lot easier. There's much more qualified firms. The MWBE, I guess, establishment has been pushed for a lot longer here. And so finding qualified firms is a lot easier than we find in other areas. We did some Hurricane Katrina work, had a very big challenge. Down in New Jersey, it's very difficult to find MWBEs. And I think it's because, number one, the governments don't push it. Here in New York, there's a culture of really trying to advance MWBEs. And what's I think is interesting is a lot of times people think that an MWBE could be a social program. Well, it's actually not. It's cheaper for the city long term because it's adding more contractors, which then makes it more competitive. So it might give an MWBE some advantage on the front side, but eventually they're going to have to compete with everybody else. But the sub base is a lot stronger for DDC and the city going on.
Thank you very much, Johnny. We're almost in the Q&A session. but before we get there, I just wanted to sort of in closing talk about what I think is one small company that's been a great success. They've been in business for about 5 years. So I'll just give you a very quick sort of synopsis of their coming into business and how they've grown. I used to teach a CM graduate course, and one of my students came up to me and said, you know, the reason I'm taking this class is because I want to go into business for myself. He was a former Tishman employee, and he said, you know, I'd really like to go into business, African-American fellow, and I said to him, okay, well, you know, make sure you pass the class, because if you don't pass the class, the likelihood is you'll never be successful in business. He passed the class with flying colors, but then, as you all know, you get into that circle of, it's sort of the chicken and the egg about getting certified, right, as a minority firm or a WBE, and you have to be in business for a certain amount of time. So we actually we gave him some work before he was a minority firm, and within a year he had his certification, and today, about 5 years later, he's got well over 25 people working in his company as a professional services company. So I guess what I'm saying with that is the traits that he brought, the characteristics that he brought to wanting to be in business, to wanting to be successful, was really, what I saw was really three things. He was a really nice guy, which helps in business. Nice guys don't finish last. That's not true. But he persevered, and he was very stubborn. He would never take no for an answer. And I find that many of the firms that are successful, that have opened doors for themselves, are always knocking on the door, and they have a thick skin. And don't look at it as rejection. We've all gone through it, and you got to keep coming back and saying, what about that job? But think about what we said earlier, what everyone has said. Do your homework. Get the intelligence. Develop the relationship with those clients. But do all of that ahead of time of wanting to get onto a team. Don't wait for a job to show up or an RFP. All of us are trying to read the tea leaves. Believe it or not, we all have a crystal ball in our offices, and we can tell what's coming way in advance. Now that's a metaphor, right? It's not true, but we're always out there doing our homework, trying to figure out how am I going to team up with somebody before the RFPs and the bids get out on the street. Develop those relationships early. Don't take no for an answer. Persevere, and you'll succeed. So at this point, I think we're into the Q&A session, right? So we've got 15 minutes, and we'll be glad to take questions.
It's hard when you're up here. I don't know if this is working. Yeah. Okay. My question for you and for the whole panel is, I'm in a precarious situation in that I opened up the New York market for my boss, a Canadian company called Multivista. And, you know, I am a woman, but the company is not minority and it's not small business certified. That said, when I opened it, we had no work in New York, and now we have 300 active projects. The problem is we are hitting a wall because some of the public agencies that initially gave us pilot programs are now saying, well, you don't have enough competition, we don't really know how to get you past that objection. We are a professional services firm, so you'd think we could do it like a building envelope company or something in that vein. But I guess I would ask you, what's your advice for someone like me? Because I'm the face of Multivista, and I'm a chick, but you know, I don't have that status, you know, and my company unfortunately hasn't attained that.
So just so I understand, you have such a specialized service that you do not have typically competition?
Yes.
Okay, that's great, right? That's a wonderful, wonderful niche market to have. But in public bidding, it could be a challenge. If your work is typically under a certain value, and I think the state level is $200,000, they do have special purchasing, micro purchases they call them, that are under a certain threshold value that don't have to go through the normal public bidding channels. You have a real interesting quandary, right? Because you're so specialized that you don't have the other two bidders to usually make a three bidder qualification. So if you go if your work is typically under 200,000, and the city is actually looking to raise the threshold of what that value is, I'm not calling it sole source, but there's an ability for the agencies to direct source to you if it's under that level.
Okay, and that's micro purchasing is the buzzword.
Micro-purchasing.
Thank you so much,
Micro-purchasing.
Elizabeth. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate that.
No problem.
Great. Glad we could help. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Olabo. I do night security. Actually, you answered my questions by saying small minority companies. Like some of us, we did some few jobs, but we are looking for a breakthrough, and we have not gotten that because most of our job does not affect the major contract. How do I actually get in as a minority contractor?
Just so that I understand the question, your company provides security services, and you've been able to get work, but at a small scale. And now your question is, how do I get it to a larger scale? How do you get to the bigger projects, right? Does anyone want to take that, Sancha?
To get to the next step and to get larger work, one, you have to look for the projects that require it. And then again, you need to make sure that you have the qualifications in order to do that. So financially, typically in a general conditions and security trade, you're looking at one, to make sure that you're able to be bonded, even though you may not require bonding. You should have the ability to be bonded. It'll give your clients the opportunity to know that you would be able to have the financial wherewithal to do the work. That's one thing. And in terms of security, again, research the projects that are out there. For instance, today at DDC, you must have heard today, we heard about at least 10 to 15 projects. All of those projects need security. And in order to know that, you would want to know well in advance about these projects coming on board. So if you see the projects in design, you would want to start contacting the architects, the owner, the general contractor in particular, and tell them about your service. Market your ability.
If I can just add to that, you want to go to the next level, and you want to get your name out there, right? One way to do that effectively, perhaps, is to join a trade association and let that association advocate on behalf of you as well, right? A louder voice is going to be heard by more. And so that might be another way for you to get to that next level.
Most of the time, I'm actually, no matter how small we start with a big company, give us whatever is existing, we give some jobs to start with. That's what I'm trying to say before you get to the next level. At least I should have a reference from that company to go to another place.
Well, it is all about the networking as well, right? So you've heard about the associations, even if it's just to get that small first entry. In our business, most of us here that are up here, the construction management business, to make a list of who are all the construction management companies doing work in New York for the public agencies. We always in need of security services, and start calling those companies and those individuals in the companies to try to get that relationship going, right? Once they make the contact with you, that's how we're going to get it started. Okay? Any other questions, statements out there? No? Yes, sir. Someone in the back.
Good morning. My name is Jamwon Fry. Yeah, my name is Jamwan Rai. I own a small business. It's called NYC Geothermal. And I've seen that New York State is doing a lot of development with low-income housing. And my thing is how come these rectangular houses that all build together, why can't they endorse more geothermal practices in the back of it, drill the holes, put the loops in, and build a more tight envelope? For instance, like ICF blocks, you know? And the return to investment is far greater than an envelope that's going to be functioning on carbon-based matter like natural gas. So my question is, how can someone like myself get involved with an entity like you all to promote this way of sustainable practice in the state of New York?
So green construction and sustainability is so hot right now. So it's a great area for you to go into. There's some realities and practicalities within the city of New York. It's very expensive to tap into geothermal resources in the city of New York, and in many instances, and I'm talking about the city, in many instances, it's almost cost prohibitive. So maybe you should look to see where geothermal would best be suited for, like you were saying, housing.
And can I answer that, please? Cost prohibitive when you mention, for instance, you take a 2,400 square foot house to operate that annually. I'm talking about conditioning, heating and cooling, not power production. It's going to cost you 70% less than conventional. One borehole, you can acquire 2 tons, 3 tons.
Installation in New York City. It's the drilling and the connections for geothermal is expensive.
So what I would also suggest is the agencies in New York that do housing, and specifically in the area that you're talking about, are HPD, right? Housing Preservation Department. I think there's an Office of Sustainability here at DDC. Correct, Rick? Maybe Rick Bell is an Assistant Commissioner here at DDC, and I think he could probably answer your question better than any of us.
Well, not so much about housing, but about public buildings in general. DDC is encouraging geothermal. Our Design and Construction Excellence 2.0 talks to how we could reach the mayor's goals of 80% carbon reduction by the year 2050, and geothermal is a big part of that. We've done geothermal projects for Queens Botanical Garden and other locations throughout the city. We don't particularly do housing, but Lou's suggestion of going to HPD and NYCHA, I think both of whom are here, if you're particularly interested in the geothermal applications to housing. Drilling is expensive, but the payback makes a lot of sense.
You know what I would suggest? Networking. Get his business card before he runs away. That's the guy. That's the guy to talk to. See, that's what you got to do. Is you got to grab him. Don't let him run away. Okay. Yes.
Can I add to that real quick? We do public housing work all over, and I'm pretty passionate about the energy efficiency side because it's green because of the pocketbook, and it's good for the taxpayers in public housing to have more energy efficient. So we push as a builder steps for increased insulation, things of that nature. Problem is HUD doesn't necessarily agree to pay for it. So in many cases, the people that are making the application, the grant applications to HUD, if they make green building an initiative, something they really care about, which New York's pretty good about, that's the best way to get the extra money. Because it is more expensive. Long term, it's a hell of a lot cheaper.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Yes, ma'am. Question. You must stand up. There you go. Because this is being videotaped. You're going to be in a movie. I didn't mean to scare you. Go ahead. Is that on? They gave you the silent mic.
Hello. One quick question. We come to events and forums like this all the time, year after year, and I'm a big football girl, so I'm going to ask this question. How do we really move the chains? How do we change the narrative, change the song? Because each year I hear we can't find companies, they don't exist in different areas, and it's 2015. So I'm just curious, really, how do we change this narrative? How do we move the chains? Because I'm looking out at this audience and saying, wow. And I've been in this audience 4 or 5 years, events all over the country. So seriously, how do we move the change and change the story?
I'm sure you attended the last hour, right? So you heard all the good stuff. So giving you, sort of repeating everything we said is not gonna help you, right? So I'll take a shot at it, and then I think that anyone on the panel can do the same thing as well. I think first of all, legislatively in New York, in the last year, I guess it was, going from now a requirement, at least on the MWBE side, to move it up to 30%, I think has made a huge difference in terms of moving that chain, because it's forced the rest of us, quite frankly, who are trying to not limit the participation, but we're trying to run our businesses while at the same time we're trying to make sure that we satisfy that percentage goal, right? And now it's a 30% goal. I think that so a 10% increase, right, on 20% is a 50% increase. So effectively, a 50% increase in workload that was created in the last year. And I'm not here, on behalf of any politician, but I'm just saying I think that in and of itself has created a huge amount of need and opportunity, right? One goes hand in hand with the other. So I think that's super critical. I think the other thing is, and you say you come here, and I don't know what sort of connections you make when you're here, right? And that, to me, I used to do that, is to try to get connected to a lot of the other firms that are here and do those callbacks and make sure that they know what you do. So for instance, I'll give you just a very quick, if I may just critique you a little bit. Is that all right? By the way, you look great on camera. We checked the video. So you stood up, you talked about moving the chains. No one here that I know of knows what you do. Did you tell anybody here what you do? Did you tell anybody up here what you do? You looked at, you got great form in terms of, you looked at the audience, you spoke to them. Did you tell any of those people out there what you do, what your business is? Tell them what you do.
I work with McKissick & McKissick, and we are a construction and construction management professional services firm.
McKissick & McKissick. So those chains have been moved quite often, specifically for McKissick. Great company. They do great work. Cheryl is great. She does a great job. Or is it the other McKissick & McKissick? I'm never quite sure which side it's on. But I think if there's anything, and again, I don't mean to, this is not a lecture, okay, by any stretch. But the connection that has to be made with all of these individuals out here has to be to say, this is what I do, I want to work for you, and I need the work, and how can we do business together? There's no magic formula. Maybe they can answer that.
Well, when I said we, I was talking about the collective.
Well, you got to lead by example.
The business of MWBEs is an industry now, and it's very often how we look at it is like the stock exchange, and it goes up and it goes down like any other business or economy. Right now, we know that the business of construction, if you look at the housing starts and you look at the number of permits, is quite high. So the question is, how do we obviously are able to get the attention and be on a level playing field? I think that's what we're looking to do. Right? It started in the city of New York. The difference that we see, the game changer and the aha moment was Local Law 1. And as a result of Local Law 1, and you heard the assembly members talk about the legislation, it is important to go onto the websites for New York State and New York City and see actually the bills that are trying to move through the different houses. Because if we don't have the legislation, then and they're not enforced, that these programs that we have, the market for MWBEs are going to go down. It's just that simple. Right now, the market is in such need for great firms like Lero we have, and Sullivan, and AECOM, and Liz would know that. You've got GCA here. The opportunity is endless and it takes a lot of work to get up there. But we now truly have a better level playing field. And you got DDC now, which prior to several years ago never had their doors open for a variety of reasons. Now it's here, and we're here today because of the opportunities that are out there and the goals both for the city of New York and the state of New York. So it's a matter of just tooling up and making sure that your presence is known.